Welcome everybody. So my name is Maria, for the ones who don't know me, and I am responsible for the information system for more than 1 year now. And in the last months, I focused my work more on the validation of Glue-2. So checking how sites and the middleware is publishing things in the VDII in Glue-2. So this training is to help you understand what we think you should be publishing for your site information in Glue-2. So you can use this glue-validator tool and be familiar with it and learn how to use it, learn about the error messages, and so on. So my intention is that it is very practical. I show you a little bit the overview of the training. So I have divided this session in 3 parts. The first part is a little bit longer and it's more technical, so it's really it's going to give you hints on how to actually use glue-validator. I will explain you a little bit the architecture, the libraries, because I think it's useful for you to know. It's very simple, and like this maybe you feel like contributing a little bit, writing some tests or something. So I hope this part is not very boring for you. But I think it would be nice if you learn a little bit about the architecture. And then we go to the practical part. So I will explain you the command line options of the tool, the output that we can get, and the type of error messages, and for which ones you have to react and for which ones you can be more relaxed. Then the second and the third part are shorter, and it's just to explain you how we are going to use all this in the production infrastructure to improve what we publish. So how we are planning to organize the validation process with Nagios, you will see. And the third part is just from the experience I gained in the last months, having a look at what sites were publishing and improving the tool, the most common errors I have seen. So I will explain you which ones are those common errors and how you can already fix them in your site. So I think this part could be also interesting. So let's start with the first part. What is and how to use glue-validator? So glue-validator is a command line tool. It's written in Python. It's really, really simple. It uses the Python unit testing module. And basically, it is able to validate Glue1, Glue2, and the AGI profile for Glue2. Have you ever heard about the AGI profile for Glue2? Yeah? I will explain a little bit more afterwards what it is. But this is what we want you to use and what we will put in production to actually validate what you are publishing. It's the AGI profile for Glue2. First of all, if you want to use glue-validator, glue-validator is currently distributed in EMI and UMD repositories. It is also in the Apple repository, but the version that it is there right now is obsolete. So I want to push the very latest version, but I don't know if you're familiar with Apple. It takes a little bit of time to become what they call Apple maintainer and be able to release packages there. So I'm in the process of becoming an Apple maintainer. When I get this status, I will for sure push also glue-validator versions in Apple. And then Apple is installed for some months now in the Midmon server. So if you have access to Midmon, you will be able to see the results for your site. And if you have access to the CERN AFS, you can always go to my public area and you will be able to directly use glue-validator from there. I always install there the very latest version. So like this, you don't have to install any RPM. It's pretty straightforward to use. So these are the places where you can get glue-validator. And now let's go a little bit to the architecture of the tool. So as I said before, we have several libraries. For each glue version schema, we have the data library and the types library. The data library is just the description of the glue schema, and I have put a snapshot there for you to have an idea. So basically, we list the object classes that describe the schema and the attributes that belong to each object class. And for each attribute, we say which type, whether if it's single or multi-valued, and whether it's mandatory or not. Okay, so it's very simple. We do this for Glue1, for Glue2, and for the AGI profile for Glue2. So basically, Glue1 and Glue2 are different because the different versions, the names of the attributes and everything change. For Glue2 and the AGI profile for Glue2, the attributes are of course the same. We are just adding some knowledge in the way we think the glue schema has to be used. So you will see, for instance, that this field, mandatory or not, is a bit different from what the schema says and what the AGI profile says. But basically, they look pretty much the same. So normally this you should not touch if you want to contribute, because this is really reflecting the description of the glue schema. Okay, then we have the type library, and here you may be a little bit concerned because you may get errors because some bugs in the library. So the type library contains a description of the types. So each attribute has a type. It can be an integer, a string, an enumeration. And all these definitions comes from the glue schema itself, from what it is defined at the working group in OGF. And you will see, until probably the tool is mature after being used in production, we will be modifying a little bit this library, I think, because of course, if the type is an enumeration and what you are publishing is not there and you think it's correct, the glue-validator is going to fail, but you think it should not, so I should probably modify this. So maybe I will be getting feedback from you to extend these definitions. Okay? But it's something that we should all agree on. It's not something we can just add something there because we think it's correct. We really need to make sure it is the case, it's correct, and we all agree to extend the library. Then we have the test. So we have the knowledge of the schema, types, and data, and now we have the actual test that we are going to run to verify that everything is correct. So we have this entry test library, that it is something that was developed at the beginning when the tool was first created, and it contains only, I think, 4 or 5 tests, very simple and very general, which we will run for all the attributes. So the type of test we can find them is whether an attribute is single valued, and it is the case, there is only one value published for the attribute, or whether it is mandatory or not, or whether it is empty or not. So these are very general tests, and we run them for all the attributes. Afterwards, when the AGI profile document was written, I wrote this library, the AGI profile test, which actually contains 1 or more tests per attribute as defined in this document, in the AGI profile for Glue 2. And you see that the tests all look very much like this. They are very, very simple, because what we actually want to check is simple, is whether we are under certain ranges or whether the attribute matches certain strings. So the tests are very simple. And here, if you want to contribute, you see it's not really very complicated. Even if you don't know Python, it's very easy to write a test like this. So I think we already have a very complete set of tests. I still have some others that I would like to implement in future versions, more general ones. And I'm sure if you come up with some ideas, this is something we can probably improve in the upcoming months with your help. Even if you don't want to write the test, you can send me your suggestions. And I think as much test we have, the better. Of course, I would like this to be always aligned with the AGI profile. So this is also something that probably we will need to make sure we are not adding things that the information system experts do not agree on. So it goes, I think, hand in hand, changing both things. And finally, the known issues, which is what I was mentioning before. We already know that the middleware has bugs in information providers, and things are wrongly published because of this. So we don't want site administrators to be bothered by this, because in any case you won't be able to do anything. It requires a fix in the code of the middleware. So what we have done is that we put this list with the tests that we know are failing and comes from bugs in the information providers, and you will be able to use an option in the command line to make sure these tests are not executed. Okay, so this is the current status of the list. I did a lot of work for storage-related attributes, and I still need to confirm certain things with the current developers. So you may be getting errors nowadays for computing attributes that are probably wrong. So in the next version I want to prepare after the conference, this list will be probably extended to contain some more tests. And once the developers provide a fix and they release the fix, we can make the list shorter, remove the test and put it back, because we know now it's correctly published. So this is something that will be alive, I think. At some point, I hope we reach the maturity where we don't have any known issues. That would be the optimal use case. But in the upcoming months, we will see this list changing a little bit. Okay, so now you know a little bit about the architecture of the tool, and I just want to stress the scope of the training. So what I'm going to explain is to validate Glue 2 taking into account the AGI profile. So the AGI profile is a document that you can find the reference in the last slide where you have some useful links. It was written by Stephen Burke, who is here, and it specifies how the information schema should be used in AGI and how information should be interpreted, what uses are likely, and how to validate this information, which is the part I use mostly to implement the glue-validator. So it's really an interpretation of glue schema taking into account what it is useful for AGI. And this is what we are encouraging now sites to do, because we don't want to put more effort in Glue 1 anymore. We want to put all our efforts in Glue 2 and in the AGI profile for Glue 2. So we will be working with this part of the validator. Okay, so now let's go to the practical part. Now you know a little bit how glue-validator works, what it is the architecture, how can you use it. So here I have put a snapshot of the command line option. So this is the usage you get from the tool if you put help. And it's very easy. If you know Ldap search, are you familiar with Ldap search commands? Most of you, the options are very much the same. You just need to specify a host name for the Ldap server, the port, and the bind. And then there is also, of course, the possibility of using a file where you have some LDIF written on it. But most of the times, I think you're going to do this dynamically. So you will go against a BDII running Ldap. And then what I have done is that just by defining these options that are mandatory, you don't need to do anything else. You will directly validate against the AGI profile for Glue 2, and that's it. And then, of course, you can do some more extra options that may be interesting for you. But just by doing this, it's enough. You will be running your validation. I will explain afterwards the other options. So this is what I have just said. It's very simple. It's very similar to Ldap search. The only thing is that the host name should be capital letter, and this is a restriction I got from Nagios. In fact, from Emir. I saw him, but he has disappeared. He came and he left. So to be Nagios compliant, H in Nagios is for the help. So for the host name, I have to use capital letter. Just remind that you have to use capital letter for specifying the host. The rest is the same as the Ldap search command. And by default, you will validate using the AGI profile for Glue 2. And then there are some other interesting options that you may want to use to understand your errors. If you don't use anything, you will get just one single line, and I will explain this in following slides, with a summary of number of errors, warning, and info messages. But maybe this is, of course, not enough for you, so you want to know the details. And for this, you have the verbosity option. So 2 and 3 are probably the best ones for you. We will see them later. And now I have realized I made a mistake there. 0 and 1 are the same, actually. I don't know why. There are 3 levels, but in the command line help, you see it says that 0 is the default 0. But 0 and 1 are the same. I should probably fix that. It's a bit misleading. 0 and 1 is very simple, just one line. And then 2 and 3 have more information we will see later on. Other interesting options. Exclude known issues. So this option is to use this library, known issues, so you won't run the tests that contain bugs in information providers. And this is very useful for site administrators. Middleware developers should do the opposite, should not use this option, because they really want to see whether what they publish is correct or not. So this is really for site administrators, and we will use this in production when we move glue-validator to Nagios. So you are not bothered by these known issues. And then there is a timeout option that normally you don't need it, because the default timeout is enough if you are validating a resource or a site BDII. For top BDII sometimes is useful, but I don't think it's a very, you don't want to validate the whole AGI infrastructure anyway. But of course, if you do it, maybe you need to set up a longer timeout, so you have this option. And then we have another option, separator, that you will see can be useful as well, depending on how you are able to manipulate the strings to get out the information you need. So you will see that by default, this is a new line. So you will see detailed information in different lines. Maybe this is not good for you to do some manipulation, some greps and things like that. You can also define this using something else. I'll give you now some examples with snapshots of these commands. First of all, output format. So as I said before, what the validator does is to be Nagios compliant. So the result it gives is this typical Nagios string giving a summary of the info, warning, and errors. That this is what Nagios uses. So this is this is what you get if you don't specify any verbose option. Just a summary. Then if you use this verbose option 2, you will get a little bit more information, and you will get the details per message type. So here you have some examples. You have the number of the error, warning, or info message, and then the description, which attribute it is concerned, and the number of times you got this error. So here you have a little bit more information. Probably this is more interesting than the first line. And this is what we are going to implement in Nagios. In Nagios, the default is verbosity level 2, okay? And then if you really want to have all the details, you can use verbosity level 3, and then you have more information. So again, the description of the error, the DN, so here you can really see which object was affected, and then the value that you are publishing. So this is very useful to debug if you don't understand why you get a certain error. Here you see, this VO does not exist, so I know what's wrong. And now you will see there are ways to tips on what you can do to get rid of the error. Okay, so this option, maybe you want to use it at the beginning when you start to do validation of the site. You get familiar with the type of errors you get, and then probably with version 2 will be enough in the future. So this is a little bit the different outputs that you can get. Okay, so now I want to give a little bit of information about the type of error messages that the validator is throwing. And we have 3 types. I have already mentioned them. We have errors, and this is all matching the description that we have in the AGI profile. So in the AGI profile, we have the definition of this type of errors. An error is something that we know that for sure is wrong, okay? A warning is a value that maybe it's okay, but we think it's wrong, okay? So it's a less severe error, but still we think it could be wrong. And the info message is something that maybe is correct, but the glue validator doesn't have enough information to consider it correct because it's either an unknown value or it's wrong for the types library, for instance. So the knowledge the glue validator commands have. So maybe you have info messages that are correct. So this is something that once you do the validation of the site, you will get familiar with your info messages, and maybe you can just dismiss them when you see them, okay? What you will get when we move this to production in Nagios is only critical errors because of errors. I hope you, it's a bit, so the error messages in validator will raise a critical error in Nagios. For warnings and info messages, there won't be any critical error in Nagios, okay? And then there is a tweaky that I will show you in the next slide, where you have information for each error. So in this tweaky, you will know what you can do to fix the error, if there's anything you can do, because some values are automatically calculated by the information provided, so there's nothing you can do. And then also it tells you if there are some known issues associated to that error and test, okay? Which in principle, if you run with exclude known issues, this should not matter to you, but it gives anyway this type of information. And here I have a snapshot of the tweaky. The tweaky is also in the reference list of the last slide, and it's what I have just explained. So every message has a number, error, warning, and info messages. Here you have the description and the associated test with the test name, and then some tips. So I have classified the type of tests if they are affecting a site, so it's a site misconfiguration, or whether they are associated to bugs in the BDII, the storage elements, or the computing elements. If you see in the column BDII bug, you can forget about that result. Normally it should be a known issue anyway, but you know there's nothing you can do. It's something that it is failing because there is a problem somewhere else. And then you have the last column, known issues. So you know if we are not aware of anything, so the test is there, is running, and you should really see what results it's giving to you. If there is a known issue, you will see yes. That means we are working on it with the middleware developers. If you check the wiki right now, you will see there are some question marks, because as I said before, for the computing attributes, I'm still trying to understand certain things with the developers. So this is something to be finalized in the next weeks. Okay, so now I'm going to give you some examples. Everything Clear so far? Yeah? Okay. So, of course, you have to, for instance, if you go to my public IFS, you have to remember to set up the libraries in the Python path so it can properly use the tool. And then here you have some examples of site validation. So it's very easy. Here I have used the CERN site PDII. But basically, just with the first command, you are running the validation of your site. You will only get one line. So maybe you want to use verbosity 2 or verbosity 3. And then if you don't like to have, you know, all the information one line, per line, you can use the -R, the separated option, to put everything in one single line. You will see this. I have some snapshots in the next slides. And finally, you can, for instance, use a top-level BDII to validate the site. You just need to specify it in the binding. So here in the binding, I'm saying validate CERN-prod, okay? But what it is published in this BDII. So it's like Ldap search. You can play with the host name, you can play with the binding. There are different possibilities. For a resource validation, it's very similar. So here I am just validating the resource information that it is published by a site BDII. I can also use some filters. The Ldap search filters are perfectly valid in the validator as well. You can say, okay, I just want to validate the Cs in my site. So you apply this filter. And then you can use the binding for a particular service to validate that service only. So anything you can do with Ldap search in terms of filters and bindings, you can do with the validator. And then the top PDII validation, well, it's the same. You just specify here the top PDII. But I don't know if it is actually useful because I think it's better to focus on a site. It's a more controlled environment. You don't know what ends up in a top PDII, and this will be validating the whole, all the sites. So probably this is not something you want to do anyway. Okay, so I have put here some snapshots of these commands. So here I am just validating the site, the CERN site BDII with verbosity level 2. So here you see all the errors and warnings and info messages. Then I say, okay, I don't want to take into account the known issues, so I run the option with exclude known issues, and you see you get less errors, the ones that are really interesting for the site. And with verbosity level 3, well, it's the same. You will see a group of lines per type of error. And here is the default separator, which is a new line. If you don't like that, you specify space and you get everything in one line. So I think this is useful, verbosity level 3 and the separator, for you to, you will see, if you have a lot of resources in your site, you are going to get a lot of errors. So you may be doing some manipulation of the output to really understand what's wrong per type of error. So I think the validator is very useful, the structure, because you can grep for the error number, and then you say, okay, but I just want to see the published value, so I'm going to grep for this string, and you can really focus and go really to the origin of the error. So I've been using it, and for me it's very useful. Of course, only few people have used the tool, so maybe now you use it and you don't like it. So of course you are welcome to give feedback, and I'm happy to add different structure in the output, other options, so this is something we can improve. Huh? But I think as it is already quite useful. You just need to get a little bit familiar with it. Okay, so this is the first part. Everything okay? Any questions for the first part of the training?
Yeah, so this glue-validator is not the same as the one that's available from FL.
The version in Apple is obsolete.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, don't use it because it's very old. It's really, I don't even think it contains the AGI profile. Okay. Yeah, don't use Apple. I will try to update Apple as soon as possible. Is it a problem for you if it's not? No. I think it's a single package, so it's not a big deal. But for sure, our aim in general, also for the BDII, is to put everything in Apple. So it should be there. I just wanted to mention it's in Apple, but yeah, I wanted to stress it's obsolete. So don't use that one because none of the options I'm describing here is available in this version. Okay, so what time is it? I don't have a watch. Okay, I don't know. Am I speaking too fast or is it okay? It's okay. Okay, I think we're going to finish much earlier than expected anyway. But that's good. Then maybe we can have a look at if you want to run the validator against your site, I can help you a little bit at the end. So the second part of this session is how to improve things with glue-validator. So now we will see what the plans are to actually use this in production in an automated way. First of all, I want to explain you how we have been doing the validation so far. So I've been working on this since the beginning of the year, and the tool has been improving since then. And at the same time, I've been already having a look at what sites we're publishing. And what I did was to start writing some monthly reports. Since March only, this is available, so we have only 3, because in August I haven't done it yet. I want to do it because there will be a presentation at the next GDB, so it's useful for me also to report about the status. And I did only for WCG sites for practical reasons. In AGI we have more than 300 sites, in WCG 150 something, so it's a reduced number of sites, enough for me to understand how things are being published and to improve the tool. So this is the reason why I did it only for WCG. So this was this all was done manually. I was looking at the results. I tried to identify the most common issues and the most important ones. So I was ticketing sites using gigas. Sites were actually very responsive. They were fixing things. So this has helped to improve the overall quality, and it has helped me to improve the tool. This was a little bit the exercise to get something mature enough to move it to production. And we have seen some improvements, but of course this approach is not sustainable because it relies on me. I don't have anyway a lot of time for this, and it's not a way to try to consolidate this activity. So we have to look for something else. And the solution is to integrate this with Nagios. So we've been discussing with EGI, and we thought it could be a very good approach to have glue-validator as a Nagios Pro. So as I said, there were some changes because of this, so that it is really compliant with Nagios requirements. And like this, we can have an automatic and stable validation process that it is part of all the Nagios monitoring that it's already in place for other things. So we are already in a very good situation, I think, because glue-validator is there, deployed in Midmon for some months. It's working fine. You can already see the results yourself. And now the only thing we have to do is to follow the formal procedure that EGI has to actually make this a production probe. So it seems this has to be validated by a team of people, and then once they are happy with it, we will start having tickets if you have critical issues, and it will be dealt with these tickets like they do for any other thing. So I think after 24 hours, the ROT team opens a GCAS ticket to a site. So I think you may be familiar with this procedure anyway. There's no difference. And as far as I know, AGI also plans to use glue-validator for the set of acceptance tests they run to validate the middleware. So this is very good as well, because I think it's another element to enforce some actions on the middleware developers when we see there are errors in the middleware. And then I just wanted to tell you that there are other longer-term goals, that this is still something that we have to discuss with the developers, but you may be wondering why we are publishing things that we know are wrong. This has been the case for always, I think, so I think it's a culture that is difficult to change, but we have now the means to enforce this since early development stages. So ideally, what I think we could do is to integrate glue-validator in the resource PDII, and if there are critical errors, do not publish anything, because publishing something that it is wrong, I think it's worse than not publishing anything at all. And this, of course, requires discussion with the middleware developers, and I don't know if they will be happy with this because it's changing the way of working. But if now we start to have this in production, sites react, correct things, I think we have to ask the same to the developers, to be dedicate a little bit of time to glue publication, because I think it's very important to have good quality in the data we publish. So this is something maybe once we have glue-validator in Nagios working fine, another area where we should make a little bit of progress. Okay, so the second part is very short. It's just to give you an idea of the plans, is to give you information as site administrators that you will see this in Nagios, and that you will get maybe tickets if you have errors in your site. And for sure, I guess this will be properly announced in EGI, so you will be aware of when this is going to happen. The last part is just some hands-on on common errors and some tips on how to fix them and to create a little bit of awareness, because I think you will see the type of errors I'm going to talk about. It's just because maybe there's not enough documentation, I don't know, but it's good that you are aware of them and you can do something to improve your site. It will be already pretty good. So the first common error I want to share with you is operating system information. I think since many years there's been efforts to improve this in the infrastructure. There are already guidelines that tell you exactly what type of strings you have to use for the different flavors of the operating systems. So please use them and make sure you are publishing the name correctly according to the guidelines. If you use Jane, it's very easy to fix because you just need to edit two variables for the name and the version. So I don't see why this could not be improved. It really requires an action on the site part, but it's very easy to fix. And there are VOs like, for instance, LHCb, who are using this information, and for them it's very important that it is correct. I already did a small campaign to fix things for LHCb sites, and site admins were very responsive. They didn't have any problem and fixed it immediately, and this made a very big impact in LHCb because they were really fighting with strange strings, and for them it's very important that we publish according to the guidelines. So please check that in your site, it's very easy to fix. Another thing that it is a little bit more complicated, I think, and I'm not sure it's because there's not enough documentation, as I said before, is everything that has to do with the batch system. A lot of attributes in the BDII, what we publish, rely on the batch system configuration. And sometimes we see that default values are published, more than sometimes, many times, I would say. So this is okay, as far as it is what you want, because default values are perfectly fine, but it would be good that you check if this is what you want. We also had problems with LHCb for this. We were ticketing sites. In most cases, there were some issues, and they had to do some corrective action. So please check that what you are publishing is correct. This mostly affects the glue-to share of objects, so anything that it is related to the number of running, waiting jobs, the average waiting time, the worst and average waiting time, and this type of attributes. So please have a look and check that if you are publishing a default value, it's because it's what you want, and if not, have a look at the underlying batch system configuration. And you have some guidelines here. There is this is maintained by EGI, and it gives some tips on what to do for this famous 4444 publication in the waiting jobs attribute. And then here I prepared a table for the different glue attributes that are concerned by the batch system and which batch system variable for PBS and LSF you have to modify. I will try to get this for other operating systems as well. But at least for PBS and LSF, you know which variable is concerned, and you can check whether it's properly configured. And yeah, this will help a lot to improve the publication that we currently have in the infrastructure, because most of the errors we are getting, it's okay, these errors are not errors, are info messages, because since default values can be fine, we don't know. But we have a lot of info messages because of this. It's the highest error we get. So please have a look, check. If you think you don't have clear instructions on what to do, report back, because I'm sure we can do something to improve that. We can review the guidelines, or we can work together with the developers to provide better documentation, or with some of you who have a lot of expertise in batch system configuration. I'm sure there are things to do. Let's try to get this right, because it's something critical for the VOs, for their job submission portals and things like that. Okay? And finally, some other common errors related to names. So we see some errors because people are publishing VO names or WSCG site names or grid infrastructure names that are not existing. So here I just want to tell you from where we take the list of all these names and we use it in the validator. So you can, if you get an error, go there and check and see, it's true, it's not here, or yes, it's here, but it's not in the validator. So then you can open a bug for me. So the VO names, we take them from the operations portal. Normally, if you publish a name that it is not here, you should ask yourself why, because normally all the VO should be registered here, and if it's not there, maybe you can contact the VO admin or EGI and explain the situation so it can be added in the operations portal. The WSG names, I am taking them from the official name that it is in the Rebus tool, so you can also check that if you get some error related to this. And for the grid infrastructure names, we have done some improvement very recently. So Stephen Burke checked what type of names are being published, and for the names that were reasonable, he has extended the list that was existing in these guidelines. And now I have to extend the list in the validator tool. So this is something for me to do for the next release. So if you get errors here and you see the name is there, forget about it, because I will extend the list in the next release. You can ignore the error for the time being. And as I said before, if you still publish something that you think is correct, but it is in none of these places, databases, contact me, contact EGI, because it would be good to have everything properly documented and aligned in both the validator and the different sources of information. Okay, so these are the most common errors. I want to repeat once more that there are still pending known issues that may be added to glue-validator, and this is all related to computing. And as I said, if you find a question mark in the error wiki, you know there's still some discussion to understand whether it could be a bug or not in the CRIM CE. Then I also started to create here in this link a table of the different glue attributes that are linked to the batch system, and whether the different information providers for LSF, PBS, and SGE are up to date with that attribute, because until recently, some of these attributes were not published at all by the information providers. So now I think the developers are reacting, they have provided new versions, and I wanted to keep this table up to date. It's still a work in progress. You will see some things are still missing, some information, but I want to finish it soon. Yeah, the list of known issues may be modified. I guess this is a process we have to discuss with EGI when we put this in production. If we release a new version of Validator, I guess somehow there should be some release notes or something, so you know if there are new known issues or we have removed some known issues because there was a fix provided already, so you know you have to upgrade at some point. This is a communication we have to sort out somehow with EGI when we put the whole thing in production. This we will discuss in the next weeks. Yeah, and of course, the version of validator that you are going to get in production will take all this into account for sure. This is something for me to do after the conference, provide a new version with all these little things I have mentioned to you that we have detected recently. Okay. So this is the end of the session. I just want to tell you that please give me feedback. You are going to be the ones to use this in production. So far it's been only a few site admins interested in this, the information system people. So for sure you may find things that are worth sharing for improvement. So give feedback for the tests. Let us know if the tests are really useful for you. If they report properly, because maybe we have some bugs there, it would be good to know this. And of course, this may have an impact on the glue-to profile. So this for sure will be a very practical exercise from now on, and we are happy to change things. Don't think this is really fixed and there's nothing else to be done. It's the first time we will use it in production, so we expect some reactions. Then also, I would like to improve the Twiki. The Twiki, I have written it for the site admins. So if you think it's not useful, if you think it's missing information, or if you think it can be done in a different way, let me know as well. And then also for the known issues, you may see you get errors for things that you cannot do anything. So let me know and I will extend the list of known issues. And then you can give feedback for anything else, the usability of the tool, if you see bugs, of course, please use Gigas. For me, it's the best way to track everything. Yeah, that's it. Okay, so this is the last slide with some useful links. So you have a guide for glue-validator, which is basically what I have just explained today in this session, with the explanation of all the command line options. This is the new, by the way, website for the information system. So here you can find, in general, very good, useful resources for many things, glue, releases, and so on. I have put here the code, so you can have a look at it. If you see also something strange, you can directly check yourself. It's very simple, so it should not be a problem to browse a little bit on it. And then you have the AGI profile for Glue 2, the document I was mentioned. I think maybe when you see something wrong, it would be useful to have a look at what the profile says, because in principle it should match what I have implemented in the validator. And then you have the Twiki for the error messages, and well, this is a Twiki I created to report about the validation activity, and there are some known issues that are general. You could find it interesting, and here you also have the monthly reports I created so far for the validation activity for WLCG sites. Okay, so this is all from me. Yeah. Are there any questions, comments? Our plans were to have this in production in autumn, so for sure before the end of the year you should have this. Most of the known issues are related to errors, are related to the storage capacity numbers that we know are not correctly published by the middleware provider, so we have removed them. So in principle you should not have many errors.
There's a question which maybe I should answer. Someone on the web conference is asking about Glue 2 becoming a standard as opposed to Glue 1. So it's a slightly complicated question. I mean, in one sense, we could say it's standard now. I mean, with this validation, I think the quality of Glue 2, possibly accepting these storage sizes, is at least as good now as Glue 1. And as Maria said, all the work now is in Glue 2. So from that point of view, I would say Glue 2 is a standard, but obviously still most of the usage is Glue 1. And we're not going to take the Glue 1 away. So I think the reality is that we get a transition period which will probably be quite long, like 2 or 3 years maybe, where both things are published together, but the use gradually moves. So the idea has always been to do this in a gradual way without disrupting anything. So I think the message is we'd like to take sites to take this seriously now, so that once, if things are published correctly, then we can tell users they can use it. But actually, I mean, a lot of this, things are wrong in Glue 1 as well, and although we're validating Glue 2 here, a lot of the bugs are the same. So things like the batch system configuration, it's the same information in Glue 1 and Glue 2. So if we fix things for Glue 2, they get better for Glue 1 as well. So I think that's the way to look at it, that we have both things in parallel now. But we should take Glue 2 seriously from now, because we want people to use it.
In EMI 3, for the middleware that was released in the EMI project, EMI 3 was already mandatory to have Glue 2. And in fact, all the EMI middleware is publishing in Glue 2, which doesn't mean that it is properly published. So this is the exercise we are doing now, improving what we publish. The problem with glue-validator is that it arrived, the AGI profile part arrived too late for EMI 3. So people could not benefit from it. So I think that's why we will see a delay in the fixes in the middleware. But middleware developers are aware of all the things that are wrong. Everything is tracked, and they are little by little releasing it, because this is unfortunately not a priority for them. But we see some progress, so they are releasing fixes.
So I wonder if this could be used in the future to validate the JSON and the XML renderings, because I'm sure you know that there are 2 renderings in OGF at the moment for Glue 2, one XML, one for JSON. But while there's a JSON schema and an XSD XML schema can fully validate the produced documents in terms of the multiplicity of elements and the relationships and the document structures, they don't do much in terms of validating the actual string attribute values and in terms of the EGI profile. So I wonder if a potential future direction for this would be to take your validator and also apply that to the JSON renderings and the XML renderings.
I think it could be possible, because right now I have some functions that are actually taking the LD file and getting the attribute name and the value. So I'm sure we can write some another function, another library to do the same for a JSON or any other language, of course. And then you benefit from all the rest for the test. Yeah, I think it should not be difficult.
So another question here is about the Slurm batch system. So he's saying there are very few sites at the moment, but it's supposed to be supported. So has that been validated?
And I have the contact with the Slurm people. So in this page, this is the page I have for the developers. You are not concerned by this, but here I have a responsibility matrix, and I have and the problem is I didn't get much information. So I don't know what the information providers are. It's, the type of things that are pending in my to-do list. Slurm and also SG. For previous and LSF is pretty easy. I have identified the people and they are responsive, but for SG and Slurm, I'm having more problems, and this is it has been a pending issue for a while. So for sure, it's work to be done and to find out whether this is also properly published or not. Okay. Well, I think we can consider the session finished. Thanks very much for coming, and do not hesitate to talk to me during the conference or afterwards by mail. I'm happy to help you have a look maybe at your site errors if you have any questions. Thanks very much.